Hi everyone, my name is Courtney and welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me, I am the unhinged person that likes to break down stuff in the bookish world using statistics and spreadsheets and data. So this first started in January when I was like, hey, the Goodreads challenges, they're doing something weird, they're doing something new. Let's take a closer look at this, try and do a deep dive on these Goodreads challenges and kind of like figure out what these are, what they're trying to accomplish with this, kind of looking at what Goodreads is trying to sell us through this, what Goodreads is trying to market to us through this. It's been a time. It's been interesting to say the least. And doing these statistics and this data really got me thinking about other stuff. I was like, hey, what is Book Talk? What is BookTube promoting and talking about? Does it line up with Goodreads? Really? Are these like the same people? Or is it like a completely different market space? So I've talked about BookTube and talking about what people have been recommending in the sci-fi fantasy space over the last year. I have more ideas for that. I want to do Book Talk at some point. I want to do publishing houses and discuss that and just discuss a lot of different things. But today we are here for one thing and one thing only, and that is going to be the Kindle. If you don't know, the Kindle is a reading device and an app. It is basically the digital tablet device that is produced by Amazon. You can also, again, download the app on your phone or on a different tablet, and it's basically for ebook reading and ebook purchasing. You might be able to download and listen to audiobooks on it too, but I'm not really sure how that works. But this is an extension of Goodreads because every time I talk about Goodreads, I keep running into the Kindle Unlimited, and I was like, I've never used it. I don't have a Kindle. And so I really just wanted to do a deep dive on Kindle and discuss what's going on with Kindle and kind of compare it to what's happening on Goodreads and see like how comparable these things really are. And so that's what we're doing today. We're discussing Kindle and we're going to be looking at some stats, some data of the top 100 Kindle books in a couple different sections and comparing and talking about it with Goodreads. So if you haven't watched any of my deep dives for Goodreads, it's not necessary, technically, stay here. If you're going to stay on a video and keep watching me, please do so. But if you want more background information, maybe go back and watch a couple of those, get a feel for it. My opinion and stuff has been evolving and it will continue to evolve into the next Goodreads video, but it'll kind of give you some background information of what we've been kind of discussing. The Kindle, it is primarily, we think about it as a tablet, reading tablet. There are a couple different versions. One is like just reading, you can't do anything else. One is more like a iPad where you can like access the internet and do other stuff. But we mainly think about it as a device to read ebooks on and to buy ebooks from. So are there any differences on reading on a Kindle versus reading on the Kindle app? From what I've found, no, technically. It seems to be that using the Kindle app on another device versus using a Kindle is really coming down to personal preference of the reader. A lot of people like the Kindle because it is free of distractions. A lot of people like it because the screen is specifically made to read books on, so it's a lot easier on the eyes than a tablet. It's also made to be held, it's lighter, it's just easier. So the preference thing for Kindle doesn't really affect the experience. If you're using the Kindle app on another device, if you're using the Kindle, they're going to be the same outlook. They're going to look the same and act the same. It's just coming down to preference. I've never used a Kindle. This was my first time downloading the Kindle app on my device. And so this was my first experience using it, just getting a feel for it. So I found some interesting stuff about it. So for me, I have an iPad and I don't really want to buy from Amazon as much as I can help it. I don't really feel like I need a Kindle. Yes, it would be nice to have that screen, but for me, I would rather use my phone or my iPad because I already have those devices. So what I did was I downloaded the Kindle app to my iPad, and from there I was looking at stats and stuff. I didn't end up buying anything. I didn't end up using Kindle Unlimited, but I was able to like look at the interface and kind of get a feel for what it would look like and feel like. So the thing when you set up your device, when you set up the app, you automatically have to connect to Amazon. I don't think you can use the Kindle app without having an Amazon account. I don't think you can just look at it without doing that process. So you're automatically connecting your reading app with a purchasing app. It's just kind of how it's set up. But Kindle is very different from like the Nook app for Barnes & Noble or just any other reading app from what I know from working at a bookstore, because Kindle is the only one that can have an in-purchase system app set up. At least they've come after Barnes & Noble for having a similar app and saying like they're the only ones that can have like an in-purchase ebook format. You're kind of going onto an Amazon page when you're like buying the book. They're very much like nestled into each other. The other thing you have to do when you set up your device is connect it to Goodreads. That's like the second thing they ask you to do. It's optional, but again, they are pairing Goodreads with the Kindle. They're wanting that to be a thing that you do. And it's something that I've talked about in the Goodreads videos about this connection between the Kindle and the Goodreads platform. I know that there's a lot of technical difficulties, that sometimes the Amazon stuff doesn't go over to your Goodreads account, and that there is some glitchiness, some bugs. It is something that they're automatically like getting you to pair together. I would assume a lot of people that use Amazon, that use Kindle, automatically hooking themselves up to Goodreads, that their reviews are automatically connecting to each other, that there are a lot of Goodreads users that are not in the wider book community that are using Goodreads because of its like connection to their Kindle devices. And so it's interesting because it's something that I surmised, that I thought was going on, and yes, it's definitely happening. There is a connection between Kindle and Goodreads, even if there is some differences, even if there is some device bugs. So from here, I wanted to do some research. I've never used a Kindle. I've never used a Kindle Unlimited. I know terms like Stuff Your Kindle Day, but I don't know how they're all connected, how it all works. From here, I watched a tutorial, how to set up your device. I watched some videos that discuss Kindle Unlimited, that discuss Stuff Your Kindle Day, and I also watched some videos discussing the Kindle update of 2025, because if you don't know, something went on with that. So let's kind of go over the research here. What is Kindle Unlimited? Bought your Kindle device, you've set it up, could just buy ebooks when you're interested in something, but a lot of times you're kind of encouraged to get Kindle Unlimited. So Kindle Unlimited is kind of like buying a Prime subscription or like any other subscription service. You're subscribing, paying $10 a month, I want to say, to access stuff that they have in their Kindle catalog. There's also a Prime Day Kindle service that's different. I don't know what the differences are. I honestly don't know. I don't hear anybody talk about the Prime stuff, so I don't know. But most people, they talk about Kindle Unlimited. They get their Kindle device, they get the Kindle app to subscribe to Kindle Unlimited and use that service. So Kindle Unlimited is a monthly subscription service, and the big thing is that there are no due dates for the books. So like a library, if you're checking out books, which is what I use and what I recommend, you do have like a due date of when you need to return the book. So Kindle Unlimited, once you download the book to your device, you're not gonna have it taken from your device. Books do come and leave the program. I don't know how that works, like if you have something downloaded, if it's gonna be booted off once it leaves the subscription. I'm assuming not, but this was something that I had a little bit confusion on. So if you are a big Kindle user, let me know, let us know. It's like Netflix. You have to read things in a timely manner because there's stuff that stays on there forever and then are one day just gone. The big thing is that you can basically check out 20 titles and keep them as long as you want. So I guess that kind of answers my question. I guess you get to keep them even if they leave the platform. If you only have 20 spots, eventually you probably are going to sub something out so that you can get that new title that you're interested in. So why do people like Kindle Unlimited? There is a wide breadth of titles. There's a really great ability to browse a lot of titles. And if you use it enough times, you're going to save money. There's also just like the flexibility and convenience of checking out stuff when you're in the mood to read it. Say you start a book, you're not interested anymore, you can check out something else instead. Whereas library, if you do that, you would have to wait for the book to be available. Say wait a couple months and hope you're in the mood to read it when it does become available. So what are kind of the cons that people talk about with Kindle Unlimited? It can be really overwhelming. There's a lot of titles, as we've seen through talking about Goodreads. A lot of times what you're going to pick is what you know, what you've heard talked about, what are on the front pages of stuff, what everybody else is reading. And that kind of creates a cycle of people reading the same things and not knowing maybe some hidden gems, but also like the stuff that's available tends to be like the same kind of thing, and maybe they have a lot of depth, but like, is that depth good? Another con, changing libraries, stuff can change. A con, it is great to find self-published authors on, but also self-publishing means that there's a lot less gatekeeping of like who gets published, so you're kind of wading through a lot of garbage sometimes. But some other pros, again, you can use your library with it. It's the ease of a library without the inconvenience of a library, and it also is great for accessibility stuff, for people with vision disabilities, for people with other disabilities. It's affordable, it's just a great great, easy access to books. There's a lot of reasons why Kindle Unlimited is a really accessible platform and why a lot of people really like it for that accessibility. But the biggest con of the Kindle Unlimited subscription is probably just going to be the limited number of popular titles. They have a lot of books that have been popular in the last 5 years, a lot of big titles that are still really popular. But if you're not interested in those titles, and you might be digging through Kindle Unlimited and not find a lot that you're interested in, and if you're looking for the big book, if you're looking for that new popular release, a lot of times they're not going to have it. Or they have it, but they want you to pay like the $14 for it. It's weird because there are a lot of popular books on here, but I would say like they're older popular titles, so you could kind of run yourself really quickly through stuff and not have a lot of choice after that, because again, you're not going to have access to the popular titles and you're not going to have a wide breadth of titles to choose from that are outside of like those 100 to 200 really popular books on TikTok and Goodreads. We'll see this when we get into the stats. But that's kind of Kindle Unlimited as I understand it. It's great for accessibility. It's great for the price if you read a lot. There are a lot of titles, but the breadth of those titles can be a little limiting, especially if you are not interested in the genres or authors that happen to be available. And it's just really interesting because I feel like Amazon, especially where Goodreads is involved, it is really trying to meet a lot of conventional expectations, but they're also trying to be different from the wider publishing market. And so it's just really interesting to see like where they align with that and where they're kind of doing their own thing. Are they upsetting the market? Yes, Kindle, Amazon, it is upsetting the book market. It's always going to be the biggest competitor. Again, there's a lot of people that like reading popular books when they come out, that like discussing them, that like having a physical, tangible book, that don't want to use Amazon services. So there is a little bit of push and pull there. Stuff Your Kindle Day, what is that? Because I've heard about it for years, but did not know what it was. So Stuff Your Kindle Day is actually an event that is hosted by people outside of Amazon. It was first started with the romance community, specifically on Romance Bookworm's blog. And I believe this is a blog that is run by like the romance community, by romance authors. So it is not an event that is connected to Amazon. It's basically a bunch of authors getting together, probably a lot of self-published authors, but other authors as well. And they just decide that they're going to have these specific days 4 times throughout the year that books are going to be really, really cheap or they're going to be free. And it's to get people excited and anticipating their books, to get them buying their books. And it's really cool because now a lot of other sections of the community do this. So I've seen an LGBT one. There's also a lot of times publishers or authors themselves will just make their book cheaper or free for a couple days or a week or whatever it is to kind of promote their book. So it's done by companies, it's done by authors, and it's really great because it's, again, access to books, but it's not done by Amazon. And I think that's really important to note here. It is a community effort. And the last thing that we have to cover before we go over stats is the Kindle update of 2025. I was specifically looking at Jared Henderson's video for this to really understand this, but this is not affecting, from what I understand, it's not affecting Kindle Unlimited. It is mainly affecting people that download and buy books from Amazon that are outside that program. So basically, the Kindle update that everybody was really upset about was the right to download your books. So you've purchased an item, it is yours, but in this world of streaming, it's not really yours anymore unless you physically own it, and this is being applied now to the Kindle book situation. So now books that you've bought, you cannot download, you cannot keep them forever, and so now it's feeling like Kindle has the opportunity, I guess, to take away stuff that you've bought if they decide that it's no longer available on their platform for licensing reasons, but maybe for political reasons as well. And the big thing about that, besides like buying a book and not having access to something that you've purchased, is that there could be changes. People have noticed cover changes on books of books that they've bought, but people are worried about book editing. What if you have a copy of 1984 downloaded to your Kindle and suddenly it's gone because it's politically offensive, or some of the words are changed, something's changed about it? That would be really weird, and people are nervous about that in this day and age, and I completely understand why people would be concerned about this. It's never great to be giving up control, especially of things that you've purchased. Again, I've always been a physical media person. I've always been a library person. This is upsetting, obviously. Like, this is not great, and so people are worried about that. But let's go back into Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, because that's what I'm really mainly looking at here, because this is the thing I think that's affecting Goodreads, that is affecting Book Talk, and we'll get into why why I think that. I've discussed the Goodreads challenges in depth, and I knew there was a connection there between Kindle, but I really didn't know the similarities there until I got into the Kindle app. I've been told that they were the same challenges, but they aren't. They are not at all. They look aesthetically the same. If you complete a Goodreads challenge in the Kindle app, it's supposed to update to Goodreads, but the challenges that are in the Kindle are not the same challenges that you see on Goodreads. What they are is kind of random. They don't really make a lot of sense to me. They're based on the books that Kindle Unlimited has in their library, but they're also kind of based on like those books that are popular. So again, it's creating like this infinite loop of like reading the same, I don't know, 100 to 500 books, maybe 1,000 books, if we're being generous, because they're basically like sending you into a loop, reading what they have available that's popular, that they've decided is going to be part of these challenges. They're kind of weird. So we have a couple of different challenges. Most of the challenges are based on reading on a particular day or a particular time. Read a book on the Kindle Book Prime Day, like kind of a thing. You read one book this month, you've read 2 books this month. There's a couple like that on Goodreads, but the main challenges that we have are based on reading certain books from a certain list. Again, those lists are different than what we've seen before. Right now, there is a award called Bookish, Bookworm, and Bibliophile, and it's weird because they all direct you to the same list. So basically, there's like this list of, I don't even know, like 100 books, 200 books, and to basically get this Kindle challenge, you have to read one of the books from this. And they are completely different than what we're seeing on the Goodreads challenges. So that kind of tells me that the Amazon team and the Goodreads team, while they might be working together, while they want you to have complementary experiences with these apps, they're not directly kind of working together. Basically, the Amazon editors, the tastemakers of Amazon, who's compiling lists, are very different people than what they're doing on Goodreads. They're doing very different things. And so we're seeing some similar books. We're seeing comparable books, as we'll get into, but it's very different. I think Goodreads is a little bit more objective, which I know is hard to say, especially all the research that I've done into that. Goodreads is trying to be based on the community, on popularity, and I know people have kind of floated the idea that maybe Goodreads is taking sponsorships for certain books, but I don't really think they are. I think this is happening a lot more on the Kindle app, and I think there is a lot more of like, obviously general market popularity, you want those books on there to be the ones that are suggested, but I think there is a little bit more about deals being made here, about what is getting picked for stuff, just like you would see a certain book picked for Barnes & Noble for the month for their book clubs, because it is a spot being bought. This was interesting, but let's get into the actual data that I've produced. So I wanted to look at fantasy because that's what I've really been covering a lot of on my channel. I didn't do science fiction just because I knew some science fiction would creep into some other sections. The other thing I really wanted to look at was romance. Romance is the main draw of Kindle. I believe, someone correct me on this, but I believe how Kindle Unlimited was set up before was that there were actually like subscription services for romance for different subjects, and you would subscribe that way. But still, one of the main draws of reading, of this accessible reading of Kindle, is their romance. So that's what I wanted to look at. My fantasy section, as you'll see, it's the first one I did. I knew there was going to be a lot of romantasy in there. So for Kindle romance, what I did was I was able to kind of curate, and I was able to select just contemporary. So the romance picks are going to be just contemporary romances, just to kind of see the breadth there and to just kind of get a little bit more in the weeds of what the romance section looked like, because we already kind of will get an idea of what fantasy and romantasy looks like. And then for my final section, I looked at fiction books. I wanted to see what were the top books for fiction, but as I did that section, I noticed I was getting a lot of books that were not what I would think of as like fiction or literary fiction. So I was able again to do another search, and I was able to look at the literary fiction. So those are the 4 categories that we're looking at. There's some crossover, there's some stuff that don't align. Why is that? So basically, when you are looking stuff up on the Kindle app, you can search for a particular genre, and then from there you can pull down another bar and select your subgenres. So there's a lot that makes sense, like you want a contemporary romance book, and then there's ones that are interesting. They're not what you would see in a bookstore, but I would say are interesting and useful, like LGBT, like African American. And then you have ones that are more trope-based and are just something you would never see in a bookstore. Obviously, they're helpful in this digital market that is really based around meeting as many algorithm searches as possible. You know, they really match up with what Goodreads is doing now, where you have books labeled not just fantasy, but dark academia, dark romance, enemies to lovers, like all these subcategories and titles that are not technically subcategories and titles. So that's what I did. I used those to my advantage. I think they would be useful, but they're a little weird, especially as someone is looking at traditional publishing and traditional library spaces where they just do things a little bit differently and are not trope focused, or at least the bookstore and the library are not trope focused. The publishing industry getting more of that, but the library and bookstore itself not as much. And so there's a couple other search engine features that you can use. You can look at relevancy, you can look at date, you can look at popularity, and you can also search by Kindle Unlimited. So that's what we're looking at with these 4 categories. If I didn't say it, we're looking at the top most popular Kindle Unlimited books for every single section. So I wanted to see what was really being available on Kindle Unlimited. And I wanted to see what was being pushed, what was going to be popular, because I mean, it depends what mood I'm in on AO3. There's a lot of times where I'm just looking at what's the newest stuff, what has just been published. But sometimes, especially if I haven't been in the fandom space very long, I look at what's popular. And so I can see why this search engine feature would be used, especially by people new to this Kindle device, new to Kindle Unlimited. So that's what I was kind of looking at to see what somebody would be looking at, but also like, yes, what is popular, what's being recommended, because that's going to give us the best feel of what the Kindle Unlimited space is offering, what it looks like, and also like how comparable it is to Goodreads and other platforms. We'll start with fantasy because that's where I started in my journey, and let's kind of go through the stats. So we're going to go through this like I do in my Goodreads videos. Let's look at ethnicity, nationality, gender, and queerness first. So this is just a breakdown of what the author diversity looks like. It's mainly white for our fantasy picks. It is 92% white. So we had 4 books by Chinese American authors. We had 3 books by biracial authors. This is probably the same author. Actually, I know it is, and they just call themselves biracial. They didn't specify what the biracial is. I'm assuming African American, but I don't know. And then we had 1 Brazilian author. For nationality, with this light purple, you can see what are English speaking countries. So we have American making up 53%, British making up 21%, Australian making up 7%, Canadian 6%. 6% were unknown. There were a couple authors I just could not find a lot about. There are mysterious Amazon exclusive authors. For the most part, you really could dig and find out a lot about people, but I didn't want to assume. But we also had 4 books by a Swedish author. I'm going to assume the same person. We had 1 New Zealand author, 1 Brazilian author, and then 1 German. So all white Western European countries, but that makes sense. Amazon, as much as it's a worldwide company, it is probably very much being used by the Western world, especially because China, the Asian countries have their own comparable services. We're not seeing a lot from South America. I don't know how available Amazon is for South American countries, and we're not seeing a lot for African, but I do wonder available those are on websites. Like, I really don't know if someone from Zimbabwe has access to Amazon. Not that they don't have access to phones, but more, does their internet service provide access to Amazon? Like I know China does not have access to like YouTube and a lot of different sites because of like regulation stuff, and I know that's probably the same with America too, especially now. From like an accessibility standpoint, especially countries that it's really expensive to buy books in, I would assume Kindle would probably be a really accessible option for a lot of people, and it would probably be a really accessible option for a lot of authors to publish too. So it's kind of sad that we're not really seeing that diversity. For women, we have majority women authorship with 79% and then 21% male. This makes sense, especially because I would assume that the majority of people that are reading on their e-readers, on their Kindles, are probably going to be women, especially because of when we'll get into genre of what is popular and what is being produced and read on Amazon. Just the type of people that write on Amazon tend to be femme or female presenting. A lot of times cis female too. Going into queerness, we had 1 book that was LGBT. I was kind of surprised by this. I feel like there are a lot of queer authors that work in non-traditional publishing spaces. I feel like it's a very accessible place for them because they can discuss things that they otherwise would be censored or maybe had to tone down stuff for. And again, there is an LGBT category that you can like look through, but I would also assume that a lot of queer people are a lot of left-leaning people, and so maybe Amazon is not something that they want to write on, and maybe it's just not the market for them to sell on because they don't get a lot of traction. But getting into the genres, we had mostly fantasy books with 89%, and then we had 9 sci-fi books, and then 2 books that I would consider general fiction because of where they are in the bookstore. This is even more different than what's being pushed on the sci-fi fantasy sphere on BookTube, and that is because when we break down into subcategories, the majority of what we're reading, 71%, is romantasy. Kindle Unlimited market is after. I'm gonna be honest, it's Sarah J. Maas clones. Sarah J. Maas is not available on Kindle Unlimited, but the titles that are the stuff you're seeing on Goodreads, on Book Talk, on YouTube, that are those like big comparable Sarah J. Maas series, what to read after Sarah J. Maas. But the next biggest section after romantasy is going to be RPG lit. You can think of it as the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, and where it was popularized, at least from my understanding. They're probably not the first person to do it, but that's kind of like where it's taken off in the last couple years. And so like D&D, RPG games, it created this market of people that wanted books that were comparable to that, and so that's what that is. A lot of it is the Dungeon Crawler Carl stuff, but there are other authors. I would also assume that these authors were inspired by like the Halo series and the Warhammer books. There are a lot of traditionally published RPG lit that are connected to franchises, so this is like people almost making up their own franchises, and I would say this is more geared towards a male authorship. I would have to read these books myself to kind of like see what they entail and what they're like, but what I know of Dungeon Crawler, I cannot say that title, is that it's kind of dude bro-y, so I would assume that these books are also dude bro-y, especially because most of our male authors are from this section. Next most popular pick with 10 books out of 100 is epic fantasy, so that's your like traditional fantasy, and then with 3% or 3 of the books is fantasy. So this was stuff that I was like, it's not quite epic fantasy, it's more traditional fantasy, I guess, but like sword and sorcery, epic fantasy, regular fantasy, it's 13%. It's not a lot. We had 2 books that were mythology based, and then we had 1 book that was a space opera. So romantasy and RPG lit are very intriguing as subjects because I would say they're really not only popular on Kindle Unlimited, but both of those I feel like really had a rise of popularity because of Kindle Unlimited. Romantic fantasy has always been popular. It's always been like a thing in the genre, but like this new crop is really inspired by Rebecca Yarros, inspired by, again, Sarah J. Maas, and it's really trying to emulate very similar things. It's just like kind of feeding off very similar tropes and ideas, and like all of that was really popularized because of Kindle and because of like Amazon self-publishing in a lot of ways. There are traditional published stuff in here too, but a lot of authors really started self-published and gained popularity by using the Kindle Unlimited market and by being like Kindle books. So let's get into authors and we can kind of see who's popular. As you will see, there are authors that are popular. They have a lot, if not all of their titles available on Kindle Unlimited. I would assume that gives you slightly less of a cut of your authorial royalties or funds, but also like you're getting so much exposure that it's probably worth it for a lot of authors, especially if they gain popularity. We can see like who is in the top 100. It's a lot of the same people. So yes, you have some singles, you have some authors that only have 2 books in here, even some really popular authors like Rebecca Yarros, but there's a lot of authors that have 3, 4, 5 books in here. So Robert Jordan with 3, his books are now an Amazon exclusive series, so it makes sense why his books are available on the Kindle Unlimited. It's to gear you up to watch the TV show. We have Helen Schurer, Amber V. Nicole, R.F. Kuang, which is probably the only, I wouldn't say only, but like the biggest traditional pub author on here. R.F. Kuang is popular on BookTube. She's popular off it. She's popular in bookish spaces on Goodreads. She's popular here on Kindle Unlimited too. And she's not only really existing in this Kindle Unlimited readership space. So we have Maria Blackwood, we have Kaylee Smith, we have Penn Cole. For 4 books, we have April Moon, we have Nisha Tully, we have Clarissa Broadwent with 5, and Raven Kennedy with with 5. And then with 7, we have Matt Dinniman, which is the Dungeon Crawler Carl series. And then the most popular author on the Kindle Unlimited Fantasy section is going to be Pekka and Valentini. And these are the Zodiac Academy books. So when I was getting into this list, I kind of had this light bulb moment just looking at all this data, because there were so many authors that I had seen their books be traditionally published in the last couple of years that I've heard about and just seen all over Goodreads and TikTok, and just kind of wondered where these people came from, especially like Zodiac Academy and like all these smaller romantasy authors. And I'm just like, where did these people come from? Where did they become popular? How do they have like 16 books already? How did they become like not just like popular on TikTok, but like why are they big on Goodreads all of a sudden? What I'm thinking, at least, is that it's not a cycle of people on Book Talk recommending the same things over and over again, going into reading for the first time in maybe many years and kind of finding the same people and just continuing that cycle. It's not just people reading what's popular on Goodreads and like seeing what's popular on Goodreads and wanting to read that again, continuing the cycle. TikTok probably has the biggest influence in the bookish world right now. A lot of people are getting their recommendations from that and wanting to read what everybody else is reading. I don't think Goodreads has that kind of influence, but we're seeing the effect of Book Talk on that community. But what I think is starting the hamster wheel of people reading the same titles over and over again is not the Book Talk world, or not exclusively Book Talk. What I think is really happening is people are rejoining the bookish world, continuing what they've been doing and reading on Kindle Unlimited, because that is really what's being advertised at the end of the day, is Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. And the reason people are reading these same books over and over again, getting introduced to the same books, is because of Kindle Unlimited. And I don't think we've really talked about, or I really realized the power of the Kindle Unlimited. Yes, I heard about it. I know a lot of people use it. I know that it's really accessible, but I don't think we think about how there's a certain type of book that's on Kindle Unlimited. There's a certain book that's popular on Kindle Unlimited, just how easy it is to access. And then people are hearing about these popular books in their day-to-day life. They're hearing about these popular books on Book Talk. They're getting Kindle Unlimited to read those books. And that is really the cycle here, is the joining Kindle Unlimited Book Talk cycle. Because even if you're not in the bookish community, you're not really hearing about these popular books. If you just join Kindle Unlimited, you're going to be exposed to those books. You're going to be exposed to Zodiac Academy, which I don't think has a greater market space outside of like this Kindle Unlimited Book Talk world, really. I just don't feel like it has a lot of curb appeal if you're going into a bookstore and never heard of it before. And so like all these books that I and other people have been questioning that have been popular on Book Talk, Goodreads, and kind of wondering where they're coming from, I think they're really coming from Kindle Unlimited. And we just, at least me, I hadn't connected those dots. And just like the power of the Kindle combined with Book Talk is really changing the market. And I think a lot of people just think of it as Book Talk, but I think it really is this Kindle. It's really changing a lot of things. So let's go into romance and kind of get deeper into this, because this is what people are coming for. Getting into our authors, they are from all exclusively English-speaking countries for romance. 74% American, a couple Irish, a couple Scottish, a couple Canadian, a couple British, a couple Australian. But again, Commonwealth English-speaking countries for the most popular books for romance. 92% white, 7% Chinese American, and then 1 undisclosed Asian American. I've talked about it. I've talked about Goodreads kind of being disappointed because this is just not the kind of demographic I'm trying to curate on my page. And then now seeing it comparable to Amazon, Goodreads is better than we think it is, but it's also like definitely being influenced by the Kindles. It's kind of interesting to see, first of all, how much other stuff is able to make it onto Goodreads, but also just like how much influence Amazon is having on these areas of demographic. Because again, the top 100 books, how much they're popular is widely different than a lot of other Kindle available books. There's just a lot of books on Kindle that people are not interested in, that people aren't picking up, that have very low ratings, because people are kind of going towards the same thing over and over again, the same authors over and over again, the same books of the same popularity, and they tend to be of a certain demographic. For queerness, we had 1 book that was queer. That was really surprising to me. It was an MM book written by a woman, but they are a woman that, at least from what I could research, seems to write sapphic books as well. So it's really fascinating just how white Western European this is. I didn't think it could get more of that, but I guess it could. I guess it could. It just makes me wonder about like the market space of Amazon. I'm wondering if there are a lot of self-published authors that are from different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different worldviews and places, and maybe one, it's not available, two, they've decided this isn't the market for them, they don't want to use Amazon, and maybe just deciding like Amazon isn't the market that's geared towards them, where they're going to see a lot of success, so they don't use it, or they're just not successful on it. Going into genre, for romance, most of it was romance with 97%, and then 3 of the books were like fiction, chick lit, books that might have like romance subplots or might not even be romance books, but were technically not romance. And then subgenres. This was really what I was interested in. I wanted to see just like what this broke down to, because with like romantasy popularity, I thought dark romance was going to be very, very popular on Kindle, and I was correct. The most popular is contemporary with 57%. Maybe should have broken the contemporary down a little bit more to really see like the difference there. I would say the biggest categories, like I said, are office romance, sports romance, and then cowboy romance is really popular right now. So those are like the big 3 subgenres of the contemporary subcategory. But the second biggest with 37 titles is dark romance. Again, this is all fiction contemporary, so it's mostly going to be mafia, billionaire, BDSM, heavy kink, that kind of stuff. I didn't break it down. I didn't give you a picture of this, but from my research, from looking at these titles, there is closed door romances, there is more like sweet, fluffy contemporary romances, and that's also something you can like look for when you search on Kindle Unlimited. But I would say the majority that is popular is going to be smut, or at least very smut leaning, spice heavy leaning stuff. But the next most popular category with 3 books is romantic suspense. That's what the category is called. I've never read one of those books, so I don't really know. Some of them are like mystery thriller that have like a very big romance subplot, so they might actually be like mystery thriller in the actual bookstore. Sandra Brown, Nora Roberts kind of stuff, very heavy mystery leaning. I don't know a lot about that genre, so I'm not going to make assumptions on it. There were 2 books that were historical fiction, and then 1 book that was I would consider fiction. And then for authors, it is very similar to the last thing, where there are some authors that you only see one time, but a lot of authors are going to be vastly popular and are going to have multiple books on here. So Rebecca Yarros has a lot, contemporary popular titles with 4. Colleen Hoover has 5 books that made the list. Liz Tomford has 5. Elsie Silver has 6. Elle Kennedy has 7, and Anna Wong has 7. So this was really interesting for me as someone that's looked at the romantasy list for Goodreads and is like, I have seen these people, Evie Woods, Liz Tomford, Elsie Silverman, things that I know that are popular in the bookstore that I've seen around. They're coming from Book Talk, but they're mainly coming from Kindle Unlimited, and that's where they're gaining popularity enough to be then traditionally published and very popular in the general book world. Let's go ahead and look at general fiction before we get into literary fiction. And I feel like this section is really good to just kind of get a bigger understanding of what Kindle looks like, because almost everything is technically categorized as fiction, so you're going to see a lot of different genres here, from mystery thriller to fantasy. I feel like this section really gave us a good look at what the Kindle landscape really looks like. So the majority of authors are going to be white with 96%, 3 Chinese American, and 1 African American. With nationality, we can see that 75% of the authors are of American descent. We got 14 British. We have 1 person from Cyprus, 1 Irish, a couple Scottish, 1 Russian, 1 Canadian, 1 Swedish, 1 Australian, 1 unknown, and 1 German. So we're seeing a couple other countries slipping in here, but again, they're all Western countries, and they're mostly English-speaking countries, following the pattern of what we've seen. Following the pattern, again, we have 87% women, 13% men authors, and there were no queer books in the top 100 Kindle Unlimited books for fiction. And now let's look at genres. The biggest genre categories were 35% fantasy and 29% romance. Again, when we're looking at fantasy, gonna be a lot of romantasy, so you can kind of think of these, I don't want to say together, but we can kind of think about romance leaning books being a big majority. We had 21 mystery thriller titles, we had 9 science fiction, and we had 6 mass fiction. So this is why I wanted to look at literary fiction, because the majority of the fiction is taken up by genre here in the top 100, which is not technically a problem, but I wanted to see what literary books were available on Kindle and just kind of like what that landscape looked like. From here, I would say what's popular on Kindle besides like the smut and romance stuff is a lot of time what would be popular when you look at mass market paperbacks. So some fiction titles, but a lot of general fiction leaning mystery thriller, and romance. And then like a little bit of fantasy and science fiction, but that lean kind of more genre heavy and more pulp heavy, so like action fantasy. And so that's really interesting to me because I feel like Amazon in a lot of ways has kind of taken over the mass market realm. We don't make as much mass market paperbacks as we used to. If you don't know, mass market paperbacks are like those small, little, short, cheaply made paperbacks, and they're cheaply made because they're cheaply bought, so they're really accessible, and they were very popular with at least my parents' generation, which is like Gen X baby boomer to like the generation before them. And so like your grandma, her house is full of mass market paperback romances and mystery thrillers kind of a thing. This new generation is going onto Kindle to get their romance books, their smutty romance fantasy books, but also like the mass market paper crowd, the pulp fiction paper crowd is going to Amazon, and kind of, again, going back to the younger generation who would be interested in those very commercial, very genre-driven titles and books, they're being driven to Kindles. Again, to reiterate, old people loving their mass markets are here. This new genre, people of readers that want a lot of heavy smut are here. And then also like people from middle age to youth that would become the mass market people are here. And then for our subcategories, we can see romantasy is the most popular with 33, mystery thriller for 21, contemporary fiction for 18, contemporary fiction, just anything that was contemporary, it's like the biggest next category, and it is a lot of contemporary romance. The next biggest section is going to be dark romance. From there you have RPG lit. Historical fiction only makes up 5 books, but is a bigger section, and our smallest category is fantasy, which is just going to be plain, epic, basic fantasy without heavy romance subplots. And then 1 Christian fiction book from what I could find. Like we've discussed, it's a lot of romantasy, a lot of romance, but also we can't discount the mystery thriller crowd, which again is me thinking that it's a lot of people that would be interested in mystery thriller paperbacks coming onto Kindle as their new accessible platform for those. And we break down to authors. Again, it's very similar where we have a lot of standout authors that are really popular and have a lot of books that are popular, but this time around we do have some more authors that only have like 1 book up here, and that could be because they only have 1 book for purchase. A lot of authors will just put 1 book available on Kindle to get people interested in a series, to get them interested in them. The company or the agent or publisher that they're working with could be doing that as well. I think a lot of times it is this, but it's also maybe they've only published 1 book, and a couple, of course, only their 1 book made it to this most popular. With 4 books, we have Rebecca Yarros, we have Elsie Silverman. For 5 books, we have Liz Tomford. For 6, we have Raven Kennedy. For 8, we have Peckham and Ventali, or the Zodiac Academy. For 8, we have Matt Dinniman. And then for most popular, we have Frida McFadden. Holy heck, I was wondering where she came from. I saw her on Goodreads and kind of knew she had blown up on TikTok, but like not really understanding where in the world she had come from with all these books. It's here. This is where I really drew my conclusion about where people are coming from in the TikTok space. It's Kindle Unlimited. But let's get into literary fiction and kind of cover that and just cover our last category so we can kind of get a well-rounded depiction of what Kindle is before I make some more assumptions about it. For the lit fiction section, we have 93% are going to be white. We had 1 indigenous book, 1 Chilean, 1 Ethiopian, 1 African American, 1 Chinese, 1 Brazilian, and 1 Chinese American. For nationality, the majority, again, 65% are American, with 24% British being the next biggest one. We have Australian, New Zealander, Irish, but then we also have some authors from some other places like 1 Chilean, 1 Polish, 1 Ethiopian, 1 Chinese, and 1 Brazilian. Lit fic, like the literary fiction sections that we've talked about on the Goodreads categories, there is a little bit more non-Western, non-American voices coming in. For gender, we have 68% women and 32% men, so there's a little bit more men in this category as well. And there's also some more queer authors, only only 4 of the books, so 4%. That is more than we've seen for all the other categories. So that has me really questioning lit fic in general. Are people that read literary fiction just more interested in reading other people's perspectives and voices? Or is the publishing world just more open to literary fiction books from other places in general? Just from like a marketing standpoint, they think they have a market for it, but also that publishing world is just more invested in those stories to begin with. I think that is something to like think about and question. I don't think that only people of diverse backgrounds only write literary fiction. Maybe they get pushed in that direction, and again, maybe like the people that are finding a market only being pushed in one demographic of reading, but also like those readers are more open to reading different types of things, and also maybe just more diverse people tend to pick up literary fiction books. I don't know. It's intriguing to say the least. I think of like Stacey Abrams. There's like tons of diverse authors that like write in genre categories that are genre writers. How much is like the market not popularizing them? How much are people just like not caring? How much is like certain demographics of readership, like romance readers, mystery thriller readers, just not picking up these stories? Like there's no way for me to do it, but I would be interested just dissecting like the types of people that read different stuff, because I don't think it's not available. I think it's marketplace, the publishers are pushing, what the publishers are picking up and buying. But it makes me sad because I don't think genre readers are necessarily like racist or trying to be racist, but certainly we've seen a lot of readers that are white picking up certain demographics of books and just not being very critical of what is going on with that marketplace and like what they're reading. Something to think about here. But let's get into genre. So the majority of the books are what I would consider fiction titles, aka they are shelved in the fiction section. But we also had 9 fantasy books, 11 mystery thrillers, 5 science fiction, 16 romance, and then 2 horrors. So they're technically categorized as literary fiction. Some of them might be more literary leaning, perhaps, which is why they're here, but from what I saw, not really. And if we break it down even more, we can see what the genres look like in this category. So the big majority of them are contemporary, 35 of them are, and then 24 are historical fiction, 11 are mystery thriller, 9 are fantasy, and then we have a ton of different subgenres. We had 2 mythology, 2 epic fantasy, 3 Christian fiction, 1 magical realism, 1 fabulous or speculative, 2 horror, 1 romantasy, 2 space opera, 1 romantic suspense, 3 dark romances, 2 dystopians, and 1 science fiction. So there is definitely a diversity in genres as well, and some of that can be because of miscategorization. I would like to think it is also like a diversity of what people are picking up when they're looking through this section, just like people that are going through the general literary fiction section of Kindle just tend to be looking for diverse titles, perhaps. But let's look at authors. A lot less authors are popular. We have a lot more authors of single titles here, but we do have a couple authors that seem to be very popular on the Kindle list. This could be in part due to, again, only 1 book being available for each author, but I think majority of it is the popularity factor, and just like 1 book happens to be the author's most popular on this site and has made the list while other ones have not. But we had 3 Anne Pratchett books, 3 Barbara Davis books, 3 Frida McFadden books, 4 Lucy Score books, 5 Megan Quinn books, and then 7 Fiona Baker books. So this is really interesting when you break it down, because we have some romance titles, we have some women's fiction titles, and we have some mystery thriller title authors that are popular. A lot of these books I would assume are popular with that female demographic of people that are looking for chick lit, like Hallmark stuff, but like some of it is more romance leaning, and then some of it is more mystery or just like everyday slice of life type stuff. There seems to be like a little bit of mix here, but it seems like these people are more open to reading these books by men authors as well, although the most popular ones are all women authors. It's interesting because, again, this demographic, it's similar to what we've seen for the other 3 categories, but it is very different. Are literary fiction readers just more open to different ideas? Is this like a general trend across the market as a whole, or is a Kindle Unlimited thing that we've noticed that happens to be similar in other reading spaces? I don't know, because I can't look at that information, but I can make a guess that maybe that is the case, that literary fiction readers just read a little bit differently than the rest of the market does and are more open to diversity. getting into the entail of this, who are the authors that we are seeing both on Kindle Unlimited and then on Goodreads? So there were 24 authors that appeared on our list that also appeared on the Goodreads list. So I compiled the list of all the authors that we've discussed that are on these lists, and I compared it to two of the challenges that have been on Goodreads. There was one in January and there was one recently in the summer section, and they're basically the same. It is our Buzzy Books challenge is kind of what I think of them both as. So I used those lists and compared them to who was the most popular Kindle authors, and we have 24 authors that appear on both lists. Our 24 authors are V.E. Schwab, R.F. Kuang, Madeline Miller, Frida McFadden, Emily Hart, Jodi Picoult, Lucy Score, Abraham Verchesi, Taylor Jenkins Reid, Stephen King, Rebecca Yarros, Kaylee Hart, Raven Kennedy, Clarissa Broadbent, Hannah Nicole Meyer, Elsie Silver, Alex Michaelides, Colleen Hoover, Abby Jimenez, Karen Slaughter, Christina Hanna, Anna Huang, and Hannah Grace. And I think this is a really interesting list of authors. A lot of these are just really popular everywhere. So we have R.F. Kuang, V.E. Schwab, Kristen Hanna, Abby Jimenez, Colleen Hoover, just people that are just popular on Kindle Unlimited, it seems, but also we've seen them on Goodreads, we've seen them all over the bookstore, we've seen them all over BookTube and BookTok, and they're just popular by word of mouth for readers that are not in a reading community or not involved in like a greater world, that are getting their recommendations from like NPR or like The View or ABC News in the morning. Basically, if you're very, very popular and you're available on Kindle Unlimited, you're going to be popular there too. It makes sense. But there's also authors that have risen up through TikTok that we see a lot that are in the most popular books on Goodreads that I think came originally from either the Kindle Unlimited service or from BookTok because they're available on Kindle Unlimited, like Frida McFadden, Anna Huang, Hannah Grace, a lot of these romance authors. It's that cycle I said of Kindle Unlimited to BookTok to back to Kindle Unlimited kind of going on. I think finally comparing Goodreads to Kindle Unlimited, I'm really seeing Kindle Unlimited, Goodreads, it is affected by like the general publishing world. Of course, it's affected by BookTok. It's affected by what's just like popular in the general market. But not everything is from the BookTok Kindle Unlimited popularity. There are a lot of things that I haven't heard of or didn't hear of before. I kept seeing them everywhere, and so I think they came from Kindle Unlimited originally. I don't think Goodreads necessarily, or all of the time, is being affected by BookTok and Kindle Unlimited like we think it is. Those big name authors that are popular, that are being promoted on like, I don't know who does Oprah anymore, but like who are being promoted on like ABC News and NPR and like those kind of things, to like people that are not in a bigger reading community online, they're always going to be on Goodreads even if they are not available on Kindle Unlimited. But also those titles tend to be older, so they are available on Kindle Unlimited and they are popular because of that. And that's why we're seeing a lot of the same authors over and over again in the Goodreads Choice Awards, in these Goodread lists, especially in the romance community. What's on Kindle Unlimited is really affecting both BookTok and the Goodreads market. That's where these people really are coming from. Whether they be traditionally published or self-published, if you get popular on Kindle Unlimited and you're a romance author, that is really going to be like a chicken and the egg situation of if you came from Kindle Unlimited, if you came from being popular, or if you came from like being popular on BookTok specifically. It's a like who influenced who first. But I want to say whether you became popular on Kindle Unlimited or if you became popular on BookTok first, the Kindle Unlimited part affects if you're going to be popular and not just like a one-hit wonder or, you know, slightly recommended for a little bit of time. The Kindle Unlimited really determines if you are going to be a talked about title. The availability of your titles is going to change your popularity, especially for romance, and maybe a little bit of mystery thriller too. General fiction, fantasy, not as much unless you're romantasy again. It's just fascinating for me because I feel like I finally understand. And maybe if you were indicted into Kindle a long time ago, you know this, you realize this, you're like, yeah, duh, of course. But I don't think I really understood how much Kindle affected certain bookish communities. Good Goodreads, I'm finding, is just really weird because it's kind of involved in everything, and it's also kind of divorced because a lot of people don't like using it or don't think about it when they're using it and don't like put a lot of stock into what's popular on Goodreads. There is some interconnectedness there. It's not disconnected, I'll say that. But if you've made it to the end of this video, maybe leave me like the little nerd emoji because I know you've enjoyed listening to statistics too. I'm trying to come up with this bigger conclusion, and I kind of already said it at this point. Goodreads is kind of being affected by Kindle. There is definitely some effect there. It's not just book talk like we always thought it was. It is Kindle. Nobody more so than the romance community and the fantasy romance community is being affected by Kindle quite in the same way. Yeah, thank you so much for listening to this. I highly recommend subscribing if you want more, because again, I'm covering more of Goodreads. I'm going to be covering the publishing world and BookTube. More stats to come, more data. But yes, thank you so much for watching. I would love comments, thoughts, discussion. Now that you've kind of seen my data, do you think Kindle is really making that big of an impact on the publishing world and like the greater book market and Goodreads market? I would love to know your thoughts and opinions. But again, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys later, and happy reading.